Hi, welcome back. This is Joe Rabil with Rabil Stock Research. So I'm going to start out the show with a lesson on moving averages. I want to talk about 5 different uses of moving averages. They're pretty simple, but I think very, very powerful. I also want to take a hard look at the cryptos. I'm going to run through those as I've done in the past. I'm going to try and include that in the show on a semi-regular basis. And then I want to talk about the breakout in Apple, and we're gonna take a hard look at it in multiple time frames and see if this is the time to be a buyer in that one. Then we'll cover what's going on in the market, and I'll go through the symbol requests that came through this week. Let's go ahead and get going with the show. Before I get into the chart, I'm going to use it as an example. I did want to just list out these 5 simple ways to use the moving averages. So first, it helps define the trend and really can be a source of confirmation for price structure. And I think I'll show you how what I mean by that, how it can be a very helpful tool from that standpoint. It helps to define the trend support and resistance. As opposed to price support, we want to look for trend support on pullbacks or rallies. And then we want to look at how it can help determine overbought, oversold. I'll give you a couple examples of that. And then helping with the momentum of the trend. Now, you need 2 moving averages for this. Again, I used an 18 simple and a 40 simple. You can use a 20 and a 40 if you want. If you use them together, this can really help to determine the momentum. And then we also want to see the longevity of the trend. How long has the trend been in place? All right, so let's look at this example. So it's a SPY daily chart, all right? And I've labeled some of these things just so you can see. So we've got this scenario here. Let me just draw this trend line in place just so you can see. So we cross above the 18, and if you notice, we crossed above the 18 here too, but it stayed declining. It never turned. But then here we crossed it and it started to turn to the upside even before we got a crossover. All right. Once we get above a moving 18 MA and it starts to turn, we have early signs of a potential reversal. We want to be on the lookout for these things when this is starting to turn. That's why I like the 18 a little bit more than the 20 because its slope shift is a little bit quicker. All right. Now, the crossover is again an early sign, a non-confirmed sign of potential trend change. And we want to know these things because if we draw in our trend line, you can see we've broken the trend line here. That's kind of like an early sign of a reversal as well. And this gives us a little bit of a confirmation not long after. Now, the reason why I think the moving averages can be really beneficial here is that if you notice where we get trend confirmation is where both of these lines, where the 18 is above the 40 and both lines are rising. Well, that's happening right about here. If you're using price structure, you'd have to wait for the first real, you never really got a test of this low. I mean, even if you use this, you can't really call that a test of the bottom. So we had a reversal of the trend, but we did not have a reversal in the price structure. It just took off like a rocket, and that happens sometimes. That's why I like to use the moving averages, and this can be a great fail-safe. So when we know where price is above both moving averages, the 18 is above the 40, and both are rising, that is constituted as trend confirmation to that direction. All right. Now, looking at support and resistance. Now, I call it trend support and resistance because this would be price support. All right. If we draw on our horizontal lines and we're looking at prior areas of support and resistance, that is valid. It is important. But when we have this moving average rising and it's respected, from that point on, we know the area. It's not an exact point, but it's the area of that line. As long as it's rising, is a source of support. And it just keeps going on, and you can see how many times until it finally broke it here. Numerous times on a pullback, you knew that you had trend support in place. All right, now the momentum is when we have both moving averages rising at essentially the same rate. They're parallel, all right? And when that's happening, we can be pretty confident. And this actually has gone on for a while. It can go starting back here. This had a little bit of a jump, but this essentially was going on for a while. We know we've got pretty good momentum that is confirmed by ADX. Through this period. Now, at the end, and we get a period where, from a longevity standpoint, it's been going on too long. This is where the crossover took place, And on a daily chart, that's just too long. The longer this goes without crossing back over, the more you should be worried about the longevity of the trend and be on the lookout for some kind of a reversal. The ADX can be very helpful in this as a source. We can see the strength of the ADX starting to die out and finally couldn't get above 25 here. But using all these things together and then the violent break of the 18 with the big red bar was a pretty telling when you know that this was a long trend. This trend had been going on for a long, long time. Right? And then we can use it as an overbought, oversold oscillator. And so when we get too far away from the moving average in either direction, I typically like to go down to the smaller time frame. In this case, if it's a daily, I'd be going down to an hourly chart and looking for signs of kind of a reversal or exhaustion or momentum divergence or something like that in either direction for a move back to the upside or the downside. Just to give you a quick glimpse, I mean, you can see it on the weekly chart. When you get too far away, it can stay up there for a little bit, but then we can use the smaller time frame and the longevity of that time frame to be on the lookout for reversal. And then this big red bar shows up basically right as this is topping out. So we want to use this overbought, oversold, and really all of these indications on multiple time frames, and they can be really, really helpful from that standpoint. So start to use these. I think they can be a pretty big advantage. If you're enjoying the content, hit that like button and also subscribe. So my services can be found at rabilstockresearch.com. I'm on the services page right now just to show you've got the advanced trend and momentum courses. So each one you can buy individually now. I'm providing lifetime access to those. Or you could buy as a bundle if you want at a slight discount. Also show the individual package, which has 3 reports each, 2 to 3 reports each week, plus a special video for that package that you can also take a look at. If you're interested in just getting started, you can go to the book, and I am offering it at a discount right now. Before I get going, my comments are for educational purposes only. Please do your own due diligence before making any investment decisions. Okay, so I want to start actually briefly going through the sectors, and then I'm going to get into the cryptos. So what I want to do is just explain there's something going on in the market. I mean, obviously it's very narrow, and you can see that because if we look at each one of the sectors, most of the sector price charts actually looks pretty good. I mean, these are moving up. Almost every one of these are moving to the upside. I mean, really, energy is kind of giving up a little bit more than I'd like to see. XLI has gone through a little zigzag sideways, but look at how the relative strength has dropped off. You see that? I mean, and really the only index or sector that's showing any real relative strength in this last little rally here is the LXK and technology. And I think a lot of that has to do with some of these big stocks. So it is pretty narrow in what's taking place when you look at it from a sector standpoint. However, if you start to look at the individual industry groups, I think you'll get a different feel. Like financials are really dropping off here, but there are some pretty attractive looking patterns in the financials. And I also think if you go inside of material sector, there are some really strong, like the metals and stuff like that, are trading really, really well on a relative basis. And I think you can look for a minor pullback. Well, they're starting to pull back a little bit. They could look pretty attractive. So don't get too drawn into this from a sector standpoint. When you look at it this way, yeah, it's not really a pretty picture, but there are a number of patterns that do look like to me that they are still setting up. And I've been highlighting to my subscribers. And I think, you just have to get the confirming evidence on a trigger standpoint with your entries and everything. You don't just go diving in if something's pulling back. Anyway, I just wanted to cover that because when you look at these, none of them really look all that great except for XLK, which has turned up. The XLU is turning here. I mean, this is actually pretty nice improvement, but it has pulled back over the last 2 or 3 weeks and potentially re-breaking its moving average. So anyway, I thought that was worth touching on. All right, let's look at the cryptos. And I'm not going to go through every one of these. Actually, let me switch this over here and we're going to go through the cryptos this way. So I want to look at the Bitcoin, and I mean, I'm actually pretty impressed with the way this is trading. So if we look at the way this is played out, we had the big move to the upside, we pull back to the 18, and then we made a move up. But when you look at that move to the upside, the MACD and the signal line are going in the opposite direction. So these are moving up, the 4 and the 18 are moving up, and these are moving down. So this is sort of like a counter parallel lines, one of my patterns. But because the momentum is so strong, you can't get too bearish on this. And I had a few questions about this. I'm saying, no, this is not a short sale or anything like that, just based on the fact that what the MACD is doing. But it might take a little bit longer. It could consolidate in here. But when we go and look at what's going on in the daily chart, we're getting something, I think, sort of intriguing, because we tried to undercut this low and we're getting a quick reversal off of that. So I think I'd be down on a smaller time frame, maybe looking for some kind of a higher low to form, and look at it in the form of an undercut and rally type of a pattern, because we took out a key level and it just doesn't seem to want to give it up right now. If we look at the ETH, it's sort of a similar situation, although we're actually getting somewhat of a pullback in here. But I do think it's important to watch the midpoint of this big green bar, which is also the midpoint of this big green bar. We're right in that area, and I think if we can hold above that, that would be a pretty good sign. Now, the way this probably plays out is it might consolidate a little bit and let these to come in before it's really ready to get going again. But, I still think the balance of power is on the side of the buyers here. Again, we have really strong momentum conditions on both the monthly ADX and the weekly ADX. And so this looks more like a pause and an ongoing trend rather than some kind of a reversal taking place. Now, I did want to point out, let's see, if we look at this BitcoinCash, notice what's going on here. We had this level that we've been watching, and I really think if we can get through that, then we could probably get a pretty decent trading move somewhere up into this region. So something to be on the lookout for. I don't want to see too much more weakness, though, because we're trying to break the 18. It's not bad that this is happening, because remember, we crossed over, the MACD crossed over here. So for this to get another test isn't really hurting this pattern at all. We just need to get this back up through these highs to trigger a new buy signal. Now, one thing I wanted to touch on is what happened with this BinanceCoin, because first of all, we know that this move originated here. This is the true original buy signal. We had a zero line reversal here. We kind of kicked off into gear, very strong condition based on the MACD and the ADX. Wasn't extended. It was kind of early in the move. And then we made this powerhouse move to the upside, and we've gotten this consolidation pattern. And then, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, this was a really nice breakout play. Now, I kind of refer to this as a fallen star, because what ended up happening is you retraced the entire move. You broke out, and then instead of retracing part of it, you retraced the whole thing and undercut the breakout level. I'm not a big fan of that pattern. I'm not, especially when there's volume associated with the selling. And anytime I see something that kind of looks like a dunce cap, right? I mean, it just looks like I don't want to be the dumb guy that bought the dunce cap. So I'm not buying this pullback, okay? I'm kind of looking at this as resistance here. Now, it might end up having some volatility and just trading sideways, but I think we've got to be a little bit more careful about this 650 level now because of the way it gave it up. I don't think that's all that attractive. And then finally, I did want to look at this link, LINK. So I like what's going on in a bigger picture here. I think this has got something developing that is really, really appealing. All right, but because of the way this is played on the weekly chart, I think you got to be patient. I know we're at the zero line. I know we're getting to the low ADX, but I have a feeling this is going to spend a little bit more time. Now, the trigger right now would be coming up through this prior peak up here. All right, if we do that, then I think that would be the trigger into this. But I think it's a higher probability that we don't do that right away. Maybe take a little bit more time, let these two moving averages, the 18 and the 40, come together a little bit more, maybe form like a double bottom here in the MACD and get the ADX a little bit lower, and then this could look a little bit more attractive. Okay, I'm going to switch over to the equities because I did want to cover a couple things. First of all, Look at what's going on the Nasdaq. The Nasdaq on a relative basis is clearly the leader here. All right. But what you don't realize, at least as of 2 days ago, only 40% of the Nasdaq is up for the year. Okay. When I talk about narrow, so this is up, pretty substantially for the year. This is the start of the year and we've moved up. I made a pretty big move in this index, but the most stocks in this index are actually down. Again, going back to the fact that a lot of big names are kind of carrying things right now. Now, it doesn't mean, and as I've said, there are some pretty attractive patterns that are developing on a pullback right now that aren't showing great relative strength. But I think if they can get into gear, this market could have some legs to it. I'm more inclined to believe that maybe we push up a little bit more and then go through some kind of a consolidation pattern or a pullback or something like that. And that could set the stage for something a little bit more meaningful. But strength right now, I mean, I think this index is being helped a lot by some big names. Oracle's up pretty big along with Apple. So you start to look at the names that are up and realize what's really contributing to this up move. But the dynamics of the pattern, the only real negative in this right now is that we're getting a little stretched away from the 18-month line. Overall, the momentum conditions are pretty good. We got pretty good green DI. The buyers are decent. I think we need to see maybe a little bit more strength in the weekly again, but I don't see any sellers coming in at this point. But now look at the relative strength. I mentioned this hitting a new high. Now, if we start to look at a couple other areas, like first of all, we can look at the Dow. You see how poorly the Dow is trading on a relative basis, all right? Really nice pattern. And there are really attractive stocks inside the Dow. But as an index, this doesn't look all that great. We go and look at the New York Stock Exchange, obviously, we're dealing with the same problem, new lows. I mean, these are multi-year relative strength lows that we're dealing with. Not the type of action you really want to see there. And then as I've talked about, I look at the IWM each week, but this week we're going to look at the small cap one, SML. And it's the same deal. In fact, it's a little bit weaker, but the pattern itself actually looks really good. And if we can get this to break out above these highs and get this RS going, I think you're going to see a lot more of those stocks that are down this year start to turn up and turn positive. And the pattern here actually looks fairly good. If it can get going, I wouldn't have a problem being a buyer of this index or the IWM or anything like that. I'm just saying I'm looking for strength out of this area on a relative basis to make me feel a lot better about the overall market conditions. All right, so that was the main point I wanted to get across there. All right, let's switch over and start looking at, I'm gonna move this over. Let's start looking at a couple of symbols. So first of all, I did want to mention the SLV in terms of what I've been talking about when we look at like industry groups and or specific areas inside of a sector. I mean, this still looks really good. I know these have been pulling back, but this is a very orderly and attractive pullback, I think, the way it's playing out. Okay, let's look at Apple here. I mean, this is a very dynamic breakout. We've gotten, a big move out of this. And the problem I have, the really only problem I have is that we're kind of going into the breakout overbought. Normally when I see that, I'm expecting some consolidation. But this is a pretty dynamic breakout, I think. Look at the this actually showed a lot of ADX strength and then consolidated. We had a low ADX condition on this time frame, and we have strong ADX on this time frame. This is a really good combination. Now, what I would be looking for is a minor pullback in here. When I added this to the list, this was actually one that I added. I thought that maybe it would pull back today or pause with the Fed coming out. And you do realize if we get an opportunity with the Fed, maybe the Fed causes things to pull back, I'd be looking for this a little bit closer to the breakout. I would use average true range. I use the average true range as a guiding tool for where to place the stop. And we want to have that average true range cause the stop to be below, I think at least below this big breakout bar, which is essentially the AI breakout bar. We want to put our stop at least below that level, I think. If we re-enter that and fail, then I would say this whole pattern is probably failing. But I got to respect the dynamics of this play. There's a pretty good volume on the breakout, and the big green bar yesterday was pretty convincing to me. Okay, let's look at e.l.f. here. So my opinion here is that this is not a weekly play. I don't like the way this sideways action on the 18. I think this is more of a daily, hourly, and we kind of needed this to move up, and now we're going to need this to pull back because this had strong ADX. This had too much strength on the ADX here. So we need green DI to take over and then hold on a pullback. So on a pullback, we want to see green DI holding, and then I think this is a playable move, maybe up towards the prior high or something like that as a swing trade. Okay, look at this APO. Great stock. I do think this breakout is actually looking pretty attractive, but it is a trading play. It's not a stock that you can put on and leave on, you know, like have on for months and months. I don't think. I would treat this more like a weekly, daily, or potentially just a breakout play that you want to, you know, look to take advantage of the next leg because it's made a pretty decent sized move already. Okay, look at UNG. You know, I mean, I think this is on the early side. We're not above the 18-month. Yeah, the dynamics of this are improving. I think this is pretty important, what's developing, but I do consider it to be on the early side. I don't know if there's really a pattern, an entry signal right now, maybe on a pullback on the daily chart. And then lastly, this TPL, wow, what a dynamic breakout, huge volume. We do need a little bit of a pullback, but you have to respect the big green bar. I mean, I talk about this all the time. We already have a finished big green bar with massive volume, with a pretty nice confirming evidence. MACD crossing, it was a reverse divergence on the monthly. I mean, I think this has something you could really sink your teeth into, but it does need some kind of a pause or a pullback. Either that or you have to play smaller size to account for the fact that you're buying it extended. Thanks for watching the show today. My research can be found at rabilstockresearch.com. My YouTube channel is called Invest Like a Pro. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.